Hey guys, so I wanted to call your attention to something today, which I found kind of arresting. So as I'm sure most of you are no stranger, obviously we've had a pandemic on our minds since 1918. And so the military was going to do exercises. They were going to warn us whether or not it was predictive programming or an actual event. I have my own opinions on that. But suffice to say, this is the precursor of what I'm going to talk about. So, this is a tweet from Ken Klippenstein. Ken Klippenstein. In 2017, the military identified a novel influenza disease as the most likely and significant threat, which it anticipated would lead to a shortage in ventilators, face masks, and hospital beds, per a Pentagon document leaked to me. They knew. And then he links it to his tweet, which I can hopefully go ahead and link to the below video. But in any case, obviously this was one of the instances, but I do know that the World Health Organization and pretty much everybody who's a virologist or allergist has been anticipating that this would happen for a very, very, very long time. Whether or not it escaped from a lab, I don't know. I heard a doctor interviewed and he said that there are certain markers that indicate that it's not. Of course, I understand that doctors can say many a different thing. So basically, it's, a little bit distressing. And so we had a lot of time to get ourselves together. Going all the way back to the Obama administration, at least I know, and I know that they've been analyzing this all the way back to the Obama administration. We've got titles like the U.S. tried to build a new fleet of ventilators. The mission failed. As the coronavirus spreads, the collapse of the project helps explain America's acute shortage. This is from the New York Times. From Fox News, federal agencies warned of ventilator shortage for nearly 2 decades. And then we've got CGR, ventilator merger scrutinizes potential killer acquisition. From Jacobin, the U.S. political system is to blame for this pandemic. So now, the very, very interesting thing and crux of this whole matter goes back to around 2009, 2008, the Obama administration, when the Obama administration was also forewarned about a potential pandemic. They contracted out a company under the name of Newport to help give them cheap and lesser expensive ventilators. But the plan was foiled because a bigger medical company came in and bought it out. The name of the company? Covidian, which is very, very strange. So they were founded in 2007, defunct in 2015, and their headquarters are in Dublin, Ireland, which I always think of the St. Patrick's driving the snakes out of Ireland whenever I think of it. So, and they're saying now, I said it was a disease that came from snakes. There are all kinds of other theories around. I don't think anybody knows, or if they do know, they're hiding it from us. But the biggest theory for a time was that it came from a pangolin. And at first I thought, oh, okay, well, that debunks my reptilian theory. But then I thought about it. I'm like, oh, wait, a pangolin is a mammal with scales, even still, like a shape-shifting reptilian who masquerades as mammals. So anyway, that's, again, I'm delving partly into the lore, but I found it interesting. So in any case, this company's name was Covidian, and it fucked everything up, as I'm going to show. So this is from the New York Times article. Years later, just a snippet, years later, after prototypes were developed, Newport, the original medical company, was bought out by Covidian in 2012. And the project ground to a halt. By 2014, Covidian wanted out of the contract. Former federal officials told the Times, and the government agreed to cancel it. A year later, Covidian was purchased by Medtronic, which told the Times that the ventilators Newport was developing would not have been usable on newborns and would have fallen short of the government's requirements. The government entered into a new contract with Philips in 2014. Oh, and it's Philips with one L. That's my pet peeve in the Mandela effect. It's like double L's seem to be disappearing, because I always remember Philip being spelled with 2 L's. I always remember Allison being spelled with 2 L's. L in numerology equals the number 3. And I was just thinking about this the other day, 33. So the 33s are disappearing from words. That's, of course, if you put a numerological spin on it, but I always thought that's interesting. And that's Pythagorean numerology. So anyway, but I digress. The government entered into a new contract with Philips in 2014 and finally ordered 10,000 ventilators in December of 2019, with delivery expected later this year. So that was a problem. We definitely saw the problem. Dr. Thomas R. Friedan, CDC director from 2019 to 2017, told the Times, "We innovated to try and get a solution. We made really good progress, but it doesn't appear to have resulted in the volume that we needed." No shit. Okay. So, Covidien, a large medical manufacturer, and this is from Fox, Covidien, a large medical device manufacturer, spent $108 million to acquire Newport, which designed a cheaper, more portable ventilator than Covidien. So already Newport's more badass, or at least very least cheaper, which is considered badass in this culture. The Times reported government officials and executives at rival ventilator companies said they suspected that Covidien had acquired Newport to prevent it from building a cheaper product that would undermine Covidien's profits from existing ventilator business. See, and that's the problem with this society. Everyone wants to blame government, but it's not just government. It's government and greedy corporate interests combined. The FTC granted an early termination to Covidien's purchase of Newport in April 2012 without opening a formal investigation. Covidien ultimately backed out of the government contract in 2014, citing concerns that the arrangement would not be profitable, the Times reported. The U.S. government then awarded a contract to another firm, but HHS is reportedly still awaiting the final product. So that was from Fox. And then this is from Jacobin. Decades of neoliberal trade policy have left the United States incapable of a wartime response to this equipment shortage. Its manufacturing base has been hollowed out and shifted overseas. The Trump administration now finds itself scrambling to import medical equipment instead at a time when 68 countries are restricting exports of medicine and personal protective equipment, PPE, including China. Of total imports of antibiotics, PPE, and medical devices, China is responsible for 35, 30, and 8.6 respectively, including 42% face shields, 45% protective garments, and 70% of mouth-nose protection equipment. Why can't the greatest economy in the history of the world produce swabs, face masks, and ventilators in adequate supply? Larry Summers, Obama's chief economist, asked on Twitter. As furious Twitter users pointed out to him, he only needed to consult his own words at a 2011 business conference. We should not oppose offshore trade. It's like offshore. That's weird. I cut it off. But in any case, he wanted to outsource and engage in our traditional trade practices, which is why we're kind of in this mess that we are. So essentially, it's both the Obama and the Trump administration that are to blame. One more thing from Jacobin. Corporate concentration played a role too. The government inked a deal in 2009 with a small California-based manufacturer, Newport Medical Instruments, to make thousands of affordable ventilators for around $7,000 less than the typical cost. The plan was foiled when the fittingly named Covidien, a much larger manufacturer, bought Newport and 5 other medical device companies as part of a trend sweeping the industry at the time. After first demanding more public money for the project and a higher sales price, Covidien canceled the contract altogether 2 years later without having produced a single ventilator. According to the New York Times rival, executives suspected the whole affair had been a move to stop Newport from undercutting Covidien's ventilator sales. And there you have it, folks. Cold, hard American capitalism. That said, I wish I had more interesting information on Covidien, why it was named what it was, so that I could sort of tie it into the happenstance of what's happening now, but I can't. That said, the more I observe this virus, the more, and I know a lot of people have different theories about them wanting to reset the economy and so on and so forth, but the more I've kind of got to go with Occam's razor, because if you just look at all the governments around the world being all wishy-washy and shit and wanting to deal with it and not wanting to deal with it and dragging their feet, and now of course it's coming out that China didn't report it as early as it should and kind of didn't seem like they wanted to deal with it at first, and then when they did deal with it, it was too late. People are talking about how it first appeared in China probably in September or October, which kind of makes sense. My God, I had something in January. I got it on New Year's Eve, which really sucked. It started with a dry cough, and then I had a very shivery fever, and then I got an upset stomach, and oh my God, if that's anything like that, whether that was a flu that emulates this or whether that is this, you don't want it. You don't want it. But regardless, I had like almost all the initial symptoms they listed, although I didn't lose my sense of taste or smell, which they're saying now is like one of the, well, I guess 80% of people say they lose their sense of taste and smell. I don't know. But I feel like it's one of those things where it's like earthquakes, every 100 years we're probably due for a pandemic. This was it. And admittedly, I've been kind of not looking so much into conspiratorial lore about the pandemic, because if I do, my head will hurt and explode, and I can't do that. I haven't been looking into the 5G thing, although I do think the 5G notion is pretty interesting. And I have been seeing, when I do watch network TV, they've been rolling out the 5G commercials like nobody's business. It's just crazy. It's like every other ad is an ad for 5G. And there's this one ad with the young girl. She's like a high school girl. And I remember I was in my kitchen one night and I heard this ad, and she had an Australian accent. You guys probably know, some of you probably know the one I'm talking about. And she was like talking in an Australian accent, and she said 5G, 5G, but she said it really fast. And from my kitchen, I thought she was saying Fauci for a split second. It was so weird. And then a part of that commercial is her sitting at a rock concert. And so she's sitting in a rock concert, but she's looking at it on her phone, and it's almost like it's a virtual reality. And the slogan is, it's like being there without actually being there. And that to me just seemed almost like a precursor for this whole thing. And then another weird thing too, and this could have been again something that my work felt like it had to do, but I would say maybe about 1 week before the lockdown, all of a sudden I had this Zoom thing pop up on my home screen, just on my desktop. And I was like, oh, Zoom, that looks like something that's toxic. That looks like something I shouldn't download, because it had one of those orangish yellow caution, what do you call it? I want to call it a pyramid. It's not a pyramid. I want to call it a boot or a pyramid. It's like a pyramid boot, a traffic thing, but it's like a traffic pylon type thing. And I was like, oh my God. And I never heard of Zoom, and none of us had ever heard of Zoom. And then all of a sudden, right before the lockdown, everybody's company started getting Zoom. And it's not like we were told anything about why we were getting Zoom. I don't even remember getting an email about Zoom. It just was there all of a sudden. So that was really weird. And then a lot of commercials too on network TV. Like, they talk about social distancing, but they were all filmed, at least with snippets, way before social distancing must have been a thing, or they did non-social distancing type things illegally, but I don't think that's the case. But it just could have been one of those things that we were not forewarned about, and it just happened, and the commercials knew, my company knew, everybody knew. And I was talking with one of my subscribers the other day, and she said, yeah, they got everything down pat really, really quickly. But unfortunately, they can't seem to do that with the medical equipment. Now, I've noticed a lot of people talking about how hospitals are really, really empty right now. And I've seen some videos about that. Like, people go to hospitals and they're like, oh my God, there's nobody in the emergency room. But the way I've been understanding it, and from what I understand, nobody wants to go to the emergency room because they're afraid of getting COVID. And so they'll not call. Like, if they're experiencing really bad symptoms, they'll not call, and they'll just stay away from the emergency room. So that's one of the explanations as to why the emergency rooms and doctors' offices are so empty. And my doctor wouldn't even see me. I had a rash in my arms the other week, which is also another symptom now, they say, of if you've had COVID-19, like, you'll get a rash afterwards. So I had this rash in my arms, and I called her, and she, of course, met with me via teleconference. But it's just like, nobody wants to go there. Now, a lot of people are also saying too, well, the numbers are down. The numbers are down because we did the social distancing thing. So the original projections were, from the best of my understanding, were if we don't do social distancing, these are the millions of thousands of people who are going to die. So that could be seen either way. I don't know if you guys saw the Chris Cuomo video, though, where he's being interviewed from his basement. I mean, there are umpteen million of those. But I thought it was weird because his voice didn't sound sick. And almost everybody I've heard suffering from COVID's voice does not sound sick. Like I wouldn't know that anything was wrong with them. So that's sort of a bit of cognitive dissonance that I have to exercise. And the language he used too was weird because the interview was entitled "The Beast Comes Out at Night," and I guess that was to signify his fever. And that's when the fever takes hold, and he called it the beast. And then he said he was one of the anointed ones, and somebody pointed out that that was really weird language, which it kind of is. And then, he just did this video where he comes up out of the basement and none of his family looks very happy to see him. And it's just like one of those weird celebrity things where somebody pointed out that they're like, I'm a celebrity, look at how normal I am. So the whole Chris Cuomo thing was weird. Now, granted, if what I had wasn't COVID, then maybe your voice doesn't change and sound all weird and raspy. But I know mine did for a time. Of course, the cough started out really dry and kind of painful. And that's another thing, too, about the dry cough. Because I told you guys in another video, which I don't expect you to remember because even I don't remember half my videos. But back when the Ebola outbreak last happened, and I want to say it was either 2014 or 2015, I hung out with a girlfriend of mine. We went to dinner, we went to a club, we came home, and we both developed these dry coughs. And I thought to myself, at first I was like, oh, I must just have something in my throat, it can't be a cold because that's not how colds start. And then all of a sudden I realized, shit, I have a cold. When the hell did colds start with a dry cough? Colds and influenzas and flus and upper respiratory flus always started with me, ever since I was a kid, with a sore throat. Then later the cough developed because you had to get it out. You had to get it out of your system. So I was like, well, shit. I guess colds and influenzas are starting differently now. And a part of me thought it might be a Mandela effect later on when I started studying the Mandela effect. And that was what I had addressed in one of my videos. I didn't get any comments on it. I didn't get any observations on it, but I had fewer subscribers back then. But anyway, I just thought it was really weird. And I was like, this is not a great trajectory for a cold to start with a cough. You should start with a sore throat. And then once you start producing sputum, as it will, gross word, then a cough should develop. And at first it probably shouldn't be very loose, and then it should be loose and break everything up. So even back, and I just think it's weird that the first time I noticed this and the first time I experienced it was when Ebola happened. And it was so weird too, because I was being so careful. Like they were telling us that whole week in the US, especially, it was like a 1 week period in October. I think it was 2014. Wash your hands, like if you take public transportation, don't touch your face especially. So I was doing all these things and I was being so careful. And then I got this horrible cough and my friend got this horrible cough and we were both totally sick. And I'm like, is this from going out to a Mexican restaurant? So that was like so strange. And then I think the next cold that I had after that followed the same trajectory. And I was like, my God, what happened to the old colds I had when I was a kid? So that was really disorienting in a lot of ways. So you had that. And let's see, let me look at my notes. Oh yeah, and another thing that I've been seeing too is, I've seen the videos addressing all of the dance lines that the nurses and doctors are doing, and that frustrated me too when I saw it. But then I put something up on Facebook. I said, what's the deal with this? Because I know I have a lot of friends who are medical personnel, along with people who work in high-stress jobs, and I'm like, what is this? And a lot of them said that in high-stress jobs, what they do is emergency dance calls or emergency dance drills. And it helps them get off stress because they still have a lot of adrenaline going from the day. So rather than go home and throw their feet up, it establishes unity and it just helps them work their yayas out. But it just seems weird to me that there are so many different ones. So that was a little, I don't want to say distressing, but I was confused by it. But apparently it is a thing. So I guess we can logically explain it that way. But as far as the dry cough goes too, I was just wondering if that was a portent of things to come. Like either we're in the upside down after Donald Trump became president and colds and flus have changed, or colds and flus have changed, or colds and flus just changed from one parallel universe to another. So I just think it's really, really interesting how the tapestry of colds and flus have changed. As far as other things that might smack of governmental corruption regarding this pandemic, I don't think that I have to tell you about scenario 21 or 201, I should say. It was a Johns Hopkins exercise in the fall of 2019, and the scenario was that the pandemic, much like I'm staring at COVIDian, much like COVID-19 started in Brazil on a pig farm. It jumped from pig to human, back to pig to human, I'm not sure which, and then spread across the world just like this whole alleged pangolin disease. Donald Trump is to blame, of course, because he fired his entire pandemic team in 2018, deeming them non-essential, which is why we have all the jokes about the non-essential workers. So whether or not this is a hoax, I don't know. It doesn't really matter because it's a problem and we're having to deal with it. I mean, it does matter if COVID-19 isn't as virulent as they say, and I believe that it's not, because it seems like there are a lot more people who have it that don't display symptoms. That means the death rate is lower all the same, and the thing that's a risk of it is that you can have no symptoms and still spread it. So that's what they're hinging everything on in terms of the urgency. Well, most everything on in terms of the urgency. That said, there is a tussle inside me because of this most recently released video. And at first I didn't want to believe it. You know, the hot mic at the White House that's been going viral on the internet these past few days. So I researched it because my first inclination was to think that it was a hoax and that a really good sound engineer had dubbed it to make it sound like it was in the White House briefing room before the briefing room and make the sound all crappy. Because technically you really can't see the words coming out of either gentleman's mouth. But the dialogue goes as follows. So the first guy is John, oh my gosh, what's his name? John Roberts, that's it. I knew it was reminiscent of a Supreme Court name. John Roberts, the gentleman with the tie on coming out of the door in, I guess, some back briefing room, I don't know, or maybe from the hallway. And he's talking with Doug Mills, who works for the New York Times. John Mills works for Fox. He's saying you can take off your mask. The case mortality rate is like 0.1 to 0.3. That's according to, I guess he quoted the study. I didn't get all the screenshots. And then Doug says, is it really? That's reassuring. Everybody here has been vaccinated anyway. They found that there are 7,000 cases in California, but they really believe that there are anywhere between 221,000 and 442,000 people who've been infected. And that's, of course, the crux of the whole disease, that you can have it and not have symptoms, which was one of my theories at the very beginning, because I was thinking, well, then the death rate is obviously lower if more people than we thought are infected. So it suggests that case mortality rate is about 1/10 of what it seems to be. So it was a hoax, Doug Mills says. And then John Roberts says, no, I don't believe it was a hoax. So what I think here is that they don't know what the fuck's going on. And the problem is that there's this constant tussle between, do we open the economy back up or do we let people die? Because they don't want to be liable. And I just feel like we'll get different information for this disease every other day. And it's kind of like how it was when they were trying to figure out the AIDS virus. Even still, the vaccination thing is arresting to me. I did look it up on Snopes. That's why I'm even addressing it in this video. So, and Snopes was very surprising, with Fox News' John Roberts caught on hot mic discussing COVID-19 as a hoax. This is a genuine video of Roberts speaking with New York Times photographer Doug Mills, not a fake news tech, before a White House briefing on April 20th, 2020. This video was not deceptively edited, nor was the audio manufactured. However, this video does not capture a narrative-destroying hot mic moment. Okay, so Snopes would spin it that way, and maybe I'm spinning it that way too, and some of you probably hate me that I'm not calling this thing a hoax. I just think it's kind of halfway between each thing. The thing of it is it still bothers me that they also want to open up and they're afraid of their precious economy. Because I think if this was really planned, they wouldn't be waffling. They would be much more authoritarian on it. But maybe that's for show. I don't know. Although I don't think Trump's that good of an actor, because Trump has no censorship. Trump says the quiet part out loud all the time, including the bleach thing everyone's making fun of him for. But you know what? And I think he's very sloppy stream of consciousness, except when he gets in the mode where he's acting presidential. But in any case, or maybe that's what he wants us to think. I don't know. But he's had too many slip-ups. Anyway, I'm digressing. So it was not deceptively edited. This video does not capture a narrative-destroying hot mic moment. Rather, it shows an informal conversation between two friends and some gallows humor. Okay. And that's my problem, though, because I didn't find it funny. I mean, I guess it's humor of a kind. This video was widely shared on social media as it showed members of the news media admitting that COVID-19 pandemic was a hoax. Others highlighted a comment from Mills in which he says, "We've all been vaccinated." These social media users did not, however, question how these two claims, the disease is a hoax and that everyone has been vaccinated for the disease, because they even coexist. So I guess that's the sense of humor part. How would you vaccinate against a disease that isn't real? Of course, they're not saying it isn't real. They're just saying that the death rate isn't as high as they thought, and John Roberts is saying that it's not a hoax. So I don't really see anything humorous in the whole vaccination thing, unless Doug Mills knows that the conspiracy theorists are saying that they have a secret vaccine. But it is still kind of strange in that all of Trump's press briefings, like, they're not following the social distancing mandate. They never have been on stage. Trump is shaking people's hands. So it's quite the head scratcher. And I know most of you are probably thinking, oh, come on, just admit it's a hoax already. I think it's partially true. But I think that they're also in contention with their economy and what to do about that. Then again, I understand the whole thing about the whole economic reset. Now, there are other things that I think are really interesting too concerning 5G. When you want to compare 5G to the erstwhile and feared ills of electricity, this is supposedly an anti-electricity ad from electricity's inception. I've tried and I've looked. I haven't been able to find that it's a hoax. I know people are really, really freaked out about 5G, and they were freaked out about electricity. I don't know why we can't just keep 4G, man. I like 4G. 4G, I don't need my videos to upload in 2 seconds. As a matter of fact, part of the fun of uploading a video is the great anticipation one feels while it is uploading. But that said, and again, I guess I'm just a wimp, because in the thick of it, it's really, really hard for me to get too in-depth and soak in those conspiracy theories, because I knew, and it was one of those things where I'm like, I know 5G's coming. There's nothing I can do about it. So a part of me just never wanted to go there. But if you're totally disagreeing with me, I totally understand. I totally understand why you would disagree with me, because I really do think that the 5G people have posited a lot of good arguments, the ones that I've seen. All the same, I do know people who've had it, and I know about 3 people who have had it. 2 of them are women. One is a male. And it just sounds awful. Like, my one friend posted on Facebook, she said something like, I was having so much trouble breathing one night, it felt like I had marbles in my lungs. You don't want to get it. But one thing that's really confusing and strange is that in LA, they're doing testing, although it's kind of stupid because my doctor says she doesn't have any tests. So I don't think tests are as widespread as they're telling us, which seems a little shifty to me. But she basically said, but they basically are saying that like about between 12 and 15% test positive for having the virus if all the people come in. And in order to be eligible to be tested for the virus, you have to meet the criteria of the symptoms. So that gave me pause, because I was like, okay, well, wait a minute, then if 88% or 85% are testing negative, then either the tests are really bad or we've got a bigger problem than just COVID-19 if people are feeling as lousy as all that. Because, or maybe just our influenza this year is emulating it, but I haven't heard anything in the news that talks about this year's strain of influenza emulating that. Although if it starts with a dry cough, I mean, who knows? Like, if now all strains of influenza start with a damn dry cough, then who the hell knows? So that's really weird. But the last thing that I wanted to leave you with, and see, this to me is my silver lining, and also to why I feel like maybe it's not a conspiracy for something deeper. Because the government was so stupid in dealing with it. It was like, oh yeah, it is a threat, it's not a threat, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, when you got oil companies going bankrupt and you got emissions all over the planet going down, that is a good thing. I mean, people talk about the economy needing a reset or the elite needing to give the economy a reset. I think this planet needed a reset. And I know what everybody's going to say, or not what everybody's going to say, but what a lot of people say is they're like, well, the global warming thing is a hoax. I'm not talking about global warming. I don't care what you call it. Our environment was screwed up from corporate greed, from the oil industry, to speak nothing of other industries, 71% of which account and attribute for all the pollution that goes on this planet. And that's what they want to diverge your attention from. They don't want you to be thinking about corporations doing all this. They want you to either think that you're doing it or that it's not a problem, but it is a problem. And it sucks, but the skies in LA have been beautiful. And they've shown pictures all over the world where just in Italy you can see the bottom of the canals, in Venice, and in India you can actually see across the horizon, one of the most polluted cities in the world. I'm getting tired. I don't know. Staying inside during this pandemic has left me really tired. So that's really good. And oil companies are going bankrupt, and that's crazy. Of course, I did have one last thought. If we want to tie it into anything, and maybe it doesn't matter if oil companies are going bankrupt, because maybe the government and world governments have discovered a new technology such that oil is becoming obsolete. What do I mean? Well, they've just released a lot of UAP videos, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. I don't know if it was the Pentagon or who released it, but they've just released that. So obviously they're not adverse to showing us that technology, number one. And number two, who knows if they've got something going on with Elon Musk. So I guess time will tell. If it turns out that they've got a new way to fuel our cars, and hopefully if it is, it's less polluting, then they'll roll it out. They'll find a way to make money on it, and they can kiss the oil industry goodbye. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. Let me know what you think and what you know, and peace out.